Okay, time for the quick sound check. If you can let me know in the chat that you can hear this, and assuming you can, I'll see you again at past. Catch you then, folks. Bye. Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome to the live live stream from Ian's studio. Great to be with you for this 30th one. Good grief, it's hard to believe. I say it every week, but I thought this would carry on for a few weeks. I thought maybe till the end of this coronavirus. Yes, I see where the problem lies. Okay, let's get started, shall we? It's great to have you all on board and watching. I see at least one new face in the chat, so if you are watching, then do say hello in the chat, and just want to say hi to everyone, particularly to Amir, who I think it's your first time watching the show, or certainly the first time I've seen your name in the live chat anyway. Great to have you on board, and great to have everybody else here. So let's get started. And for the benefit of anyone who isn't familiar with the shows, they are weekly every Sunday night at 7:30. They stay on, yes, enough said about that, the better. I am way behind in doing all the editing on the shows and getting them cut down and into highlight versions on there, so less said about that the better. They're on YouTube for a while. Let's just leave it at that, shall we? The shows are designed to be as interactive as you can be in a live stream, which is to a certain extent. I can't hear you guys, but I can see your comments in the chat. So if I do that, I can see everything that's going on in the chat on there, and I can respond to what's going on. So if you've got questions, do ask them in there. I've got a couple of points within the show tonight where I can answer live any photography related questions. Well, you can ask other questions as well. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer them though. But we've got those points in there. I've already got quite a few questions now. They've been submitted during the week. Some held over from previous weeks because I couldn't answer them there and then. I'm going to deal with quite a few of them tonight. And not all, some will go over into future weeks. But if you do have any burning questions, do get in touch, either by questions in the live chat or questions in the comments if you're watching this on the replay. Or indeed email them to me during the week, and I'll deal with them in a future show, or deal with them tonight if it's in the live chat on there. Do remember to subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel. Do comment on videos as you watch them, and please hit that like button. There's 17 of you watching at the moment, and only 8 of you have liked it. So the rest of you, just hit that thumbs up button. You know you want to, and do let other people know about the show as well. I have noticed that the vast majority of my viewers are from the northwest of England, with a couple of exceptions who come in from other parts of the world. France, mentioning no places, Peter, on that. So do share it. I'm sure there's other people in other bits of the country and other bits of the world who hopefully will get benefit from watching these live streams. The Facebook group, I think just about everybody who's on the live chat anyway is aware of my Facebook group. It's where we continue the conversation during the week, and a place for you to share your images, some of which I will comment on Facebook, some of which I will comment on here on the live streams, and that's what I'll be doing tonight. Picked a few up to talk about as ever, and it's where I keep people informed with what's going on with the live stream, what's going on with the studio, etc. So do join that if you're not already a member. And I also have a newsletter. I must get one out this week. The big problem I've had with the newsletter, and this is going to lead into something else I'm going to say later, but I have written a blog post, and it's a blog post all about things which are happening at the studio. The trouble is, every time I'm just about to post it, the government makes an announcement which changes things. And, well, the latest one is Stockport's back under local lockdown, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail a little bit later on, and how that affects me and how that affects things in the general area as well. It's not just me it affects in terms of what we can do as photographers over the coming weeks. Yeah, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, then that's the address. It's also down below in the description for this this live stream. So what have we got on the show this week? Well, the news segment. Tonight's theme is the 12020 challenge, the results. That sounds like one of those reality shows, doesn't it? The results. No, it's not that. It's me sharing with you 3 of the photographers who've taken part, their photos as part of the show tonight. I've got some others which are coming up in future weeks, maybe 1, possibly 2 a week going forward. So this does mean that those of you who haven't yet done the 12020 challenge and would like to have a go at it, then please do. You should be able to download the start and end cards and all the information from the description. I think it's still in there. If it isn't, just go back a couple of live streams in the YouTube channel and you'll find the link there to download them all. And it'd be great to have your images on here that I can share on a future live stream. But tonight we've got ones from Gary Platt, we've got Stuart Rees, and we've got Terry Hewitts. And I've really enjoyed looking at your the results of your challenge, guys, and I hope you like how I'm going to present them a little bit later on as part of the show. We're going to look at some of your images, and I set a sort of theme of things you photographed in lockdown this week, because I didn't really have a particular theme for this week, because it being about the 12020 challenge, and that didn't really work for people just posting images on the Facebook group. So let's see, we'll have a look at those. I've got some feedback on some of them. I've got the live Q&A, and I'll be doing a lot of A on that, a lot of answers to questions this week, in between showing the results of the 12020 challenge. So that's the main thing, and I've got at least 1 image I'm going to do in-depth feedback on a little bit later, and that's from Amir, who's joining us, I think, for the first time tonight. Right, okay, news, the big news story, the last few weeks I've been pulling up this photo with the big headline, "Events are back." Well, big headline, events are not back. As of Friday, Stockport is back in local lockdown again, and that affects what we can do in the studios. Legal restrictions are on us on that, and the key item in the government guidelines is this paragraph, which says, if you operate a business, which I do, or organise events, which I'm trying to do, within the affected areas, yep, we're in the affected areas, you should take steps to ensure that people do not socialise with people they do not live with, in line with COVID-19 secure guidance. Right, so what does that actually mean? It means that really anything where there is a socialising aspect to an event at the studio, I can't run. That means group shoots and really workshops, to be honest with you, because there is always going to be a socialising side where people are looking at each other's cameras, the images that they've taken and things like that, and that side we can't do. What other businesses have to do really is ensure that people from separate households remain apart. So in pubs, for example, it means that tables between separate households need to have the barriers between them, or they need to be over 2 meters apart so that the people are not together. I can't achieve that here in the studio. So there's no way that particular thing can be dealt with within the studio setting. It's not only that, it's also about us doing the right thing as well. I am overcautious, I'll admit that, but there is a problem with COVID. We're seeing these infection rates rise, and just thank goodness, thank God that we are not seeing the death rates rising as rapidly. But it could do. The death rates will follow behind the infection rates. So if we all do our little bit, what little bit that we can do. Now, me stopping an event here, it's not much, but it's my small contribution to fighting this battle. And it's not just about stopping the events and preventing 6 people from mixing. It's about sending a clear message to other people that we need to do this. And I wouldn't feel comfortable saying to people, don't mix, keep your social distance and all that, if I was breaking those guidelines myself. And I feel that the only way I can comply with these guidelines is by not running those events. So I'm really, really sorry for those of you who were planning to come to particular events that I'm running, or were hoping to, or were thinking of doing that. Okay, so what can I do here? Well, I can still do one-to-one training, and that will involve myself as a tutor, a person being trained, and a model. We can organise social distancing so that works. And that one of the things to do with direct business related things can happen. So I believe that's possible under the guidelines. After all, training, believe it or not, training can actually take place in people's homes. And we're not allowed to mix in people's homes, but training can. So I think specific training on pre-arranged, on particular topics, I'm fine to go ahead with. Studio hires, certain studio hires can go ahead. I think so long as the aim of the studio hire is educational, it's not an excuse for a social get-together. So in other words, if 3 photographers from different households wanted to use the studio and say, oh, can we just hire the studio and get a couple of models in, and no, that's becoming a social thing. But if a couple of photographers wanted to hire the studio because they've got client work that they need to do, that's absolutely fine. So it's a very fine balance, and it's a tightrope walk that I'm going to try and walk, and I want to try and set an example of what we can and should be doing. Because the more we follow these guidelines, horrible as they are, and I am not an apologist for Boris Johnson and the Tory government. I don't think they've handled the crisis well, if I'm honest, and I don't agree with a lot of the things that they are doing. But I think we need strong leadership to deal with this, and if people start ignoring the rules, it's going to spell disaster. There's one person who watching this live stream who knows firsthand the dangers of COVID, and I do not want that to happen to anybody else. So please, folks, bear with me. I know it's a disappointment. Sorry, I've ranted on enough about COVID. Let's move on. But I felt it needed to be talked about, and I needed to explain to you why I'm taking the stance that I am on there. Right, so the 12020 challenge. Big thanks to everyone who's taken part, and the images are great. I'm so pleased that so many people have done it. I didn't know whether people rise to the challenge or not when I set it. So thank you everyone for doing that. If you've still got your images and you've not sent them in, we transfer them to me. If you want to do the challenge, you haven't done it yet, please do. Let me know you're going to be doing it, and I'll make sure I can include your images in a future live stream on there. If you don't know what the challenge was, just to recap, it's 2 hours, the 120 minutes, to take 20 photographs. But there's a catch. No deletions. They must be consecutive frames. There's no retakes. In other words, every image must be a different subject, and you must agree to show the images publicly afterwards, i.e. let me have them, and I will do a presentation with them as part of the live stream. So our first, let me just check my slides here. Yeah, the Q&A, get your questions into the Q&A, into the live chat on there. I was expecting a different slide coming up. That's come up twice. Right, okay. I'm going back to the 120 because I want to play in the first video. I thought I had a card for that, a PowerPoint slide for it. So let's play in the first one, which is from Stuart Rees. And then after that, I'll come back and I'll talk about his images as well. So, Control. Right, so that was Stuart's challenge on there, and I have to say I really like that. It's Liverpool, as you probably guessed from the images on there. I just want to talk about a couple of the images. So if I can. Yeah, this one, I love well, actually, before I talk about that, just to say generally about the selection of images and the subjects that Stuart has chosen for this. I like the fact that he's gone to a particular location to do it. He's made a decision that he's going to do Liverpool. And I like the fact that we've got this real mix of different types of images, from the things like the ships and the scenic, the sort of the large areas on that, compared to some of the sort of detail shots, like the little detail carving that we've got there. So I like that mix that you've got in there, Stuart. And I can never remember what these things are called, the llama banana things that they have in Liverpool. I remember photographing that. I was there when they first appeared on the streets, and I recognise at least two of those that I have photographed in years gone by, which is this one over at the back and the clown one on there. Shots that I think work really well. I do like this sort of detail of the studs, and I'm assuming that that's just a paving ground. My only comment about this one, Stuart, is it might have been nicer to put the focal point that little bit further in, maybe to about here on the image, which might have given you a bit of a deeper depth of field, and just have the front ones going out of focus on the on there. Another one I like is this, the padlocks, and I like the fact that it's got this really shallow depth of field to it, but we've got our hero padlock on the 1/3 line, and that works really nicely with that. It's a nice shot. I think with that, Stuart, one thing you might want to think about is converting it to black and white. I think that could be quite powerful as a black and white image. Talking of black and white, actually, this is something that's come up as a question, and it keeps coming up on the Facebook group about black and white conversions. And I think I need to spend one of these sessions actually just talking about black and white and some of the ways we convert and the techniques involved with that. I know I've touched on it before with some of the edits, but it seems to keep cropping up. So I am going to talk in a couple of weeks' time, I think. I'll do a theme on black and white and how we do those conversions and some of the tricks behind it on there. So anyway, that's Stuart's. Oh yeah, I like this one as well, which I think that's the live building. I can't quite tell with the. I'm sure that must be. It's just that the bird's hidden on there. Or maybe it's one of the other three graces, I'm not sure. My only comment about this one, Stuart, is I would try to avoid the rail bit at the bottom on there. So I would have gone with a crop a little bit more like that. That one window that's open there, I do quite like that, but I'd like to have tried and found an angle where it was just somewhere else rather than right on the edge of the frame. So I'd lose it from the edge of the frame and I'd come up with something like that. Incidentally, I would also, with this, bump up the contrast. I don't know whether we can do much with the vibrance and saturation on it, but probably the texture, something like that. Maybe a little bit on the dehaze. That's probably gone a bit too far, actually, with that. And you end up with something looking a little bit like that. So, yeah, I just wanted to pick on one to talk about there on that. So, that's it for those. Let me get back, have a look at the chat. Yeah, Stuart's confirmed, yes, Liverpool won on there for the steps on that. And Gary says he likes the idea of a black and white session. Wonderful. Okay, so back to where I was on here. This is where I'll find wherever that slide is. Okay, Q&A. If you have got questions, please put them in the chat and I'll get to them. Remember, there's a delay. And if you've got questions during the week, that's the email address. Contact me at ians-studio.co.uk. and I'll pick them up from there. So the first question, same thing. First question tonight is from Gary. This is rapidly becoming the Gary Platt show on there. Right, okay, just before I do, comment from Stuart saying the images were all straight out of camera, so no work done to them at all. That's fine, and for straight out of camera, that's pretty good. I'm not sure I'm quite brave enough to show all my images straight from camera when I do something like that, but so no, well done, Stuart. That little bit of editing to them. What I tend to say about the challenge is a little bit of editing work is fine with it. Just don't go compositing them and all that sort of thing. Just minor tweaks. I've done one where I converted them all to black and white, so the whole set was in black and white. So yeah, on there. Right, okay, so Gary's question, what's the difference between the different types of vignettes in Lightroom? Okay, let's head over to Lightroom again, and I'll just get this set up, and then I'll switch the display over to it. And, right, yes. I'm going to use one of your images, Gary, to answer the question, and it's this one. It's your start image for your 12020 challenge. Right, let's have a look at vignettes, which are hidden down under effects, post-crop vignette. Now, I'm going to go full screen so that you can see everything a little bit clearer on here. And what Gary wanted to know about was this style, the fact that we've got 3 different styles on there, the default being highlight priority. Now, what's the difference between them? Well, highlight priority tries to protect any areas which are bright and highlight in the highlight areas of the image when you apply that vignette. So it's not quite as severe on the highlights. It's not just that, it also tries to protect the saturation. The color priority gives priority to the colors, so that as it darkens or lightens, it makes sure that the color doesn't get doesn't shift. It tries to protect it. So what's the best way of seeing the difference, or seeing it? Well, actually, sorry, the third one. Oh, come on, brain into gear in, and paint overlay just literally paints a dark matte or a light matte over the top of the image. So to try and explain this a little bit better, what I've done, I've picked this image because it's got highlighted areas and it's got quite dark areas down here. I'm going to create a vignette. Now, this is not how I expect a vignette to be used, but it's a way that you can see what the differences mean on here. So I'm going to do a full vignette. I'm going to completely make it unfeathered, and I'm going to bring the midpoint right in, and I'm going to bring the roundness right in like that. So you can see we've got this big vignette. So the difference, what's the difference between them? Well, for paint overlay and color priority, paint overlay just has that black area, highlight priority has that. But if we go halfway, the difference between highlight priority and paint overlay, can you see it just becomes this murky area? So as I bring that out, it's just a grey area that's plonked over the top. Highlight priority adds the effect on there and tries to preserve the saturation, whereas colour priority tries to keep the colour the same. Now, did you notice the difference between the two of colour priority And highlight priority? No, neither can I. And it is allegedly very, very subtle. In fact, it's so subtle that I cannot see a difference with it. I never have between the two of them. I can see a big difference with the paint overlay one, particularly when you get to something like that, because it just dulls. If you look at the branches and all there in paint overlay, it doesn't look good. Highlight priority, it looks so much better in there. Now, there is another control which gets confused with this, and that is the highlights slider. So what does the highlights slider do? Now, this is where the real protection takes place of your highlights. So if I bring the highlights slider up while I'm in highlight priority, you can see what starts to happen. In fact, when I go all the way up, the vignette is there's very little of it applied to the brighter areas, but the darker areas still have it on there. So it really, the highlight slider actually protects the highlights. Interestingly, it doesn't work when you go the other way, because the moment I go past 0, you'll notice that's grayed out, so it makes no difference whatsoever on that side, but down here it does. Now watch again as I do that. It just means that the higher highlight areas get affected less. So don't protect it, reveal the highlights on there. So it allows you to have that control over your vignette. How much would you use it? It depends on the effect that you want. Sometimes you don't want to darken the sky, but you want the vignette elsewhere. That's where you would use it on there. Now with paint overlay, because it's just a straight overlay, that highlights one's not available. And as you can see, it's just a grey area on there. Now if I start to feather that off, it just looks horrible and muddy, doesn't it, on there? It doesn't look good at all. And why they even offer it, I don't know. Whereas the other tends to go quite well, but I tend to have my highlight priorities down because I like the darkening of the sky, helps it look a little bit more saturated. If I went to colour priority, it will preserve, in theory, it preserves the colour of it with potentially at the expense of the saturation, but I really can't see a difference between them. So those are the main things with that. One thing I will say, I'm just going to reset everything. For the benefit of anyone watching this who doesn't know my technique on how to apply a vignette, I generally leave it on highlight priority, and what I do is, if this was an image I wanted to vignette, I'd bring down until I got quite a dark vignette on there, quite a long way. That's much further than I want. I then feather it so that it becomes nice and soft. I may bring the midpoint in a bit if that was appropriate. I think it might be on this one, and I might make it a little rounder on there. So I've got something like that. Now, the next part on this, how I do it, is I put my mouse over the slider for the amount. And I know you can't see this, but I'm putting my hand over the controls. But I can't actually see the controls. I know my mouse is on there, so I can click on it, and I start to adjust it until the point I think I've got no more vignetting on there. And that's about there. Now you'll be able to see on the slider that it is actually still there. I'll move my hand out of the way and find I'm still at 53 on there. Quite a lot of vignetting on that. But by doing it that way, it reduces it to a point where my attention as a viewer isn't on the vignette, it's on the image. And to see the effect of it, we toggle it on and off with the little switch here. And you see it's made a big difference to it, but it's not such an obvious vignette as it would be left where it was, and it's that pull back on the vignetting. So let's go and have a look at the comments and see whether that's been of any help to Gary, as it was his question. Right, so what have we got in the comments? Yeah, nice set of images from Stuart. So comments on there. Yep, I agree with all that. So hopefully, Gary, that's answered your question on how to do it. So let's move on with where we're at. Right. This one's from Peter, who wanted to know how to improve a scanned image. Oh, hello Rick, who's just joined us in the chat on there. He wants to know how to improve an image that he has scanned. So I'm just going to set Lightroom up and then I'll switch over to that so you can see it. And right. So this, oh, I'm completely out of sync with all my things. Something's gone wrong. I've edited the wrong slides here, so sorry folks, all out of order, because there should be a follow-on slide to this one from Peter on there. I'll deal with it anyway. Peter submitted an image to the Facebook group of a pair of hands holding a cat, which is this image, which is a slide that he'd scanned. What he'd done is he'd cropped it. I wanted to know whether there's a way to improve the final image on there. Now, how's the image been created? If I remember correctly from what Peter told me, and correct me in the chat if I've got this wrong, Peter, that's a laptop screen behind with a white document on there, and he's clearly holding the slide in front of it and then pointing the camera at it and photographing it that way. And it's a technique that people use. It's not going to give you the best results, but it will work. But there are a couple of things you need to do at the scanning stage before you actually do any work in Photoshop or in Lightroom to enhance the image. The first thing I would say, Peter, is get a macro lens, because this is your image. We're only going to use this very small rectangle in the middle of it. So we're throwing away all this resolution around the outside of that. So what you should be photographing, your photograph should look, in camera probably something like that sort of amount, or maybe even tighter if you can get it, so that you've got the full resolution that you're working with on there. So I'm just going to reset. Yes, I am going to reset that on there, because the next thing I want to talk about is getting the exposure right. Let's just think about a little bit of logic on this. And that is, what we've got around the outside there is the white document. That ain't white. And I'm going to prove it with a different crop. Your histogram is based on the crop area. So if I just crop a bit, just a bit of that, that should be pure white. We can see here on the histogram that it isn't. It's well into the grey area. So you need to set the exposure on your camera to make sure that this is right up against the histogram. Now, I'm going to do it in post-production. I can do it, but this would be so much better if you got it right in the exposure. And look on your camera, I don't know what mode you're shooting in. Ideally, you should be in manual mode for this, and set a manual exposure where that bit of the histogram is right up there. Now, I'm just going to put on the highlights on there, and as I bring that up, you'll see we're starting to get the blur out. We don't want that. We want it just below, because we don't want to lose detail in the actual transparencies either. So that would be the exposure, and you can see that that is just about 3 stops. I've moved it up. So effectively, your slide image is 3 stops underexposed. So if I now undo this crop, reset, we can see here on the slide, right from the word go now, that we've got a much better image to start with. Now, I'm playing around with this in post-production, so the quality is not going to be as good as if you got that initial step right in camera. So those 2 steps at the beginning will enable you to get the maximum resolution, which will help you with the post-production edits, and the maximum, the best exposure possible. So right, already now we've got something better to work with on that. Now, it is a little bit overexposed for the subject. We've possibly lost a bit of detail on the face, but I think that was probably overexposed on the original slide. So now we've got that, we can start doing our work on here. And I'm leaving on the highlight clipping, and I would actually now bring this back a little bit to get a better result. I think it needs to be a bit more contrasty on there, and probably the clarity would be what we want. Now, this is sepia toned on there, and one of the things I would do with an image like this, I would be tempted to actually go to black and white rather than sepia tone, and then if I want the sepia tone, to add it back. And I've done that with when I've scanned prints before which have been sepia tone. I've then controlled the sepia tone myself later. So I've now gone to that, and I can play around the contrast a little bit and bring it up a bit on there. Now, it's a little bit soft. Now, I don't know whether that was the original transparency or whether that was a focusing issue with the copying. In fact, there's an easy way to find out, and that is, yeah, I think you weren't quite focused on there. Peter, make sure the camera's on tripod when you do this. I'm just going to have a look at the EXIF data. Right, yeah, ISO 400. What I would do is I put the camera on tripod. I would then set my aperture to f8 in manual mode, then adjust my exposure just on the white screen until it's just about pure white on the histogram, first of all, and work with whatever exposure that is. And that might be, well, with something like this, that's going to go down to maybe a second or so. Let me work out the maths on it. So ISO 400, bring that down to 100, that's 2 stops. So we're going to go 40th, 20th of a second. Then F4 to F8 is 2 stops. So 10th, that would be a 1/5 of a second you'd be shooting at. Focal length, right, you're on a fixed focal length lens on there. You might want to use, if you've not got a dedicated macro lens, think about extension tubes so you can get in close on that, looking at the settings on there. But do it in manual mode. Right, okay. Then double check that you are in focus, because that should be absolutely pin sharp, that text, and it isn't. which means the slide won't be either. So with that, that makes it difficult to get anything really good from it. So back to the full thing, just bring that back on there. So why does this sometimes go fill rather than fit? Right, so we've got that. Then we've got the obvious things that we should do. Straighten up those horizons on there with it. Not much else I can do in post-production. The split toning, right, I will bring that, I'll do the usual thing, bring the saturation right up on both of those, then I can see what color I need. It's usually 37, 36, something like that, 35, then bring that saturation back down on there. And I've got my, I've got the sepia tone back in, and I find that's just a better way of doing it. It's personal preference to do it that way. So that's about the best I can pull out of that, I'm afraid, Peter. But the best way to improve it is to go back and effectively rescan it. Of course, if you've got access to a slide scanner, you'll get even better results than doing it that way. So hopefully that's helped. Let's have a look what the comments have been saying while I've been talking. And what have we got? Follow Rick's advice. Hit the like button. Right. Yep, no comments further on that at the moment. But right, yeah, that's how I would improve that scanned image, Peter. Hopefully that's helped. Right, so now Gary Platt's 12020, and these are all images from Portmeirion. Thus the various comments in the chat right at the very beginning about I am not a number, I am a free video cast and all that. And Gary, you missed the response to my my comment, my posting in the chat where I said information, we want information. The correct response from the prisoner is you won't get it. Right. Oh, noticed a newbie on here, Andy Bell, just saying hi in the chat. His first visit, care of Amir. So hi Andy, nice to have you on board and having you with us on the live stream. Do dive in with any questions in the chat on there. Right, okay, so let me play in the images from Gary Platt from his images from the 12020 live stream. brilliant. Thank you, Gary, for those images, and thank you for doing the challenge. And I have to say, I really enjoyed looking at these. If you haven't, well, most of you know I'm a bit of a science fiction geek, thus all the Doctor Who stuff that sits on the front of the desk for these live streams. But I'm a bit of a fan of the Prisoner as well. I've not watched it for years. I had it on videotape, and of course videotapes have long gone. I really must get the DVDs of it. Gary, if you haven't already heard it, a company called Big Finish, who do a lot of the audio adventures for Doctor Who, have done an audio adaptation of The Prisoner, and it's really good. I've got the first box set on it, well worth a listen to. Anyway, that's an aside. Let's talk about Portmeirion, the place, which was used as the village in The Prisoner. I mean, Gary has got some great images. I expected nothing less from Gary, to be honest, on that. And I'm guessing these, I know it's some minimal edits on them. And again, I like that nice mix on there, some interesting images which are just patterns and details. I rather like that. It looked a little bit odd when I first saw it as a thumbnail. I thought, oh, what's that? But then when I saw it full screen as I was preparing all this, I thought, yeah, I like that swathe of colour going across there. I just felt that one worked really well. Another interesting image with this is this detailed shot of railings and the window vent there. Again, just nice looking at things like that. But then contrasting it with some of the views, the classic views of Portmeirion, such as looking across the central courtyard on there. Just slightly bemused at that one, because what I remember there was a lawn in front of it. Maybe I'm misremembering that, or is that the lawn that's in front of it? It's just the angle I'm looking at this. Well, anyway, it just gives this nice feel of the location in there, and I'll go this way. And this, now, that image is an interesting one. I wanted to comment about it because it's one that shouldn't work but does, and it works on a lot of different levels on it. It's a nice abstract. There's symmetry in it going left and right with the arc of the water. The horizon on the third line, it's very slightly underexposed on there. Ooh, and a dust spot on it. But in the context of a series of images about Portmeirion, particularly because I know that Gary is interested in The Prisoner as well, and I think that's the connection with Gary going there. There are a lot of iconic scenes in the series which take place on this beach area, and you see people running along it trying to escape from the village. So it is actually quite iconic of the set and the location. So whilst in some ways it could do with some foreground interest, and it's a shame you didn't have a great big large white blow-up balloon to go in the foreground on that. Again, reference to The Prisoner. But it would benefit from that. But even without it, in the context of the display, with that sort of prisoner theme to it, it works because it's an iconic view from the program. So those are the ones I wanted to just pick up, except just to say, Gary's sticking two fingers up at me. It's not on, you know. It's not on. Right, sorry. Right, okay, let's have a look what's been going on in chat while I've been talking about that, and see what's going on. Fido didn't make an appearance. Rover, it's Rover, Gary, the balloon on there. Right, anyway, moving on from all that, let's see what else we've got. So feedback, yeah, Amir gave me an image asking for some feedback on tonight's show. So let me get that set up in Lightroom and I will do that. Right, so here we go. This is the image, and I'm just going to take the. No, I shall leave the clippings on there. Well, actually, I'll just toggle it off for a moment so you can see this a little bit better, and I'll go full screen. Right. This is a sculpture that's in the sea, and I know, Amir, somewhere along the lines I saw the EXIF data for this. I think you might have sent it separately, but I just assumed it would also be in the image, and when I came in tonight to prepare all this, I discovered it wasn't there, so I haven't got the true EXIF information on it. But what I do know is a long exposure. I seem to remember you were talking, I can't remember if it was 30 seconds, 13 seconds, or 3 seconds, or something like that with it on there. Now, the first thing I would say about this, Amir, is it's underexposed. Now, how do I know that? Well, let me put those highlight warnings, those clipping warnings on here. You can just do it by, I use the shortcut key of J, and you can see these areas where we've not got the detail in there. So just watch your exposure. Now, I'm guessing what you were doing was trying to protect the highlights of the sunset on that. But if I go over here and just raise that up a little bit, we can see we've got scope where we're still not blowing out on those highlights. And you see how far I can go before it starts going out. So right, let me just bring that back slightly. I don't want it too much, but I do want to raise effectively those shadow areas. And I'm going to do it in the tone curve rather than the shadows slider. And if you don't know the reasons for that, I have a video on YouTube which explains the difference between using shadows and darks in the tone curve compared to the shadows slider in the basic panel. And I'm just going to bring it up a little bit in there, and maybe the darks as well. Oh, it's not doing it on there. It's not doing it as much as I wanted. I'm just going to go back to basic on that, and I will use the blacks just to. It's not going to unclip that. Oh, it's definitely clipped in the original image. I can't get that detail back that I'm after in there. Right, I would just try and pull the exposure up just slightly with it. I'd like to see a little bit more contrast, but the contrast in the mid-tones, so therefore the clarity slider is what I would use, and just a touch more on the vibrance with that. And I think that those are the sort of post-production bits I would do. But generally about this image, I like the composition with it. I like the colours with it on there. And I like the way you've chosen to do the long exposure, to give this sort of candy floss effect with the sea. And I think that is absolutely the right decision to make with it. And I've said this before to you, Amir, and I just want to say it again on this. I've really enjoyed seeing how your photography has improved over the last few years. When I first met you, you will remember I was quite harsh with you about some of your images at the time, and comparing what you were shooting then with what you are shooting now, you've got some absolutely brilliant stuff that you've shot recently, and I really want to give you a lot of kudos on that for working at your photography, and I love seeing how you've improved with it. I really do. You seem to have found your niche with things like the landscape stuff and some of the wildlife stuff that you've done recently is really top-notch stuff. And I've just spotted one other thing on this image which I just need to comment about, and I think this possibly explains why we've got clipped highlights as well on here. And it's a shame I haven't quite got the full resolution on this, but we've got a very slight halo effect around the structure, and that's usually caused by over-aggressive post-production on there. I get it a lot with my images, but there is a fix in Photoshop, and I'm going to just try this. I'm going to try editing this in Photoshop. Edit in Adobe Photoshop, and with the Lightroom adjustments. This will take a moment to open, hopefully not too long on this PC. Right, there we go. It's got a dialog box appearing on a different screen. Right, now I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go in more than 100% on this, which that's the sort of level I'd like to be, which you would work on the original thing. You see the halo on there. There's a really easy way to get rid of them, and it's using the clone stamp. Yeah, where is it? Where is it hidden these days? Oh, come on. Where have I lost it? There it is, clone stamp on that. I'm going to go with the clone, not one that big. Bring that down using the left bracket, square bracket key, left bracket key. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to say the mode of darken, which means that only the lighter areas will get affected. So if I select my source to be here and then start painting, you can see it just does the lighter bits without affecting that dark section, and I can quite easily just go over that edge, and I might need to just reselect here to get it lined up on there, that, and we just go down, and I've got rid of your halo on the edge there, and on that, whoops, didn't quite manage to line that one up. Try that again. Oh, I go full screen. My shortcut keys and Photoshop don't quite work right, so I can just do that. And I've got rid of the halo. I could carry on all the way down here, but it's a nice little way of doing it, and that would just improve that image as well on there. And it's a minor thing, Amir, on that, but I just wanted to show that technique, and hopefully that will help you with it. But I do think it's a lovely image. You're really lucky with those skies, assuming they're not put in with luminar. It does have a little bit of a luminar look to it, but I'm assuming it's genuine on that. So those are the things I would do, is deal with the halos, just brighten it up a little bit. One thing just to say, Amir, the fact when people present an image that's consistently underexposed like that, it sometimes points me in the direction of a monitor that's not been calibrated. If your monitor hasn't been calibrated, then try and do that, because most monitors are set too bright, and that leads to people with images which are underexposed because the monitor's too bright. If you were to print it out, it would look horribly dark on there. So that's a slight aside on that. Right, let me just change over all my my different bits of screen, etc. On that. Right, sorry, having a bit of trouble with Lightroom there in the background. Right, okay, so yep, it does look stunning, Andy Bell says. It's nice. Calibrated iMac, great. Well, that's not it. And Amir is saying in the chat, let me just pull that up on screen so people can see. There's no compositing, great, good. I didn't think there was, but on there, it's called Mary's Shell, right? It's on a calibrated iMac, great, fantastic. Glad you've got it on there. Yeah, went for the underexposure. I think you possibly went a little bit too far. It's my opinion. Obviously, it's personal preference on there. I tried to keep that feel with it, but with my tweaks. But I just felt it needed that little bit more, particularly a bit more detail in those shadow areas on that. So, where are we? Q&A. Another one from Gary. Right, okay. This one. And he was asking about titles for images. And he said, how important are titles for photographic images? I've always maintained that images should stand for itself and that titles are an afterthought. I still think that, but, he says, I recently saw some images where the titles gave the image an entirely different framework and caused me to reassess the images I saw. So in this instance, the title and the image were intertwined. Right, so how important are titles? Right, well, before I try to answer that question, I think there's something else we need to think about. And that is, what on earth are we talking about? What do we mean by title? Now, when Gary posted this in the Facebook group, one of the people who responded to it was Brian Parkin. I don't know whether you're watching tonight, Brian, either live or on the replay. If you are, do let me know. Brian pointed to an article he'd written for a camera club about titles, and he was referring to the title of the file so that you can find it easily on the computer. And when we start talking about image titles, we actually can mean lots of different things. Do we actually mean the file name, or do we mean the caption? And if we're talking about captions, are we talking about a descriptive caption, or are we talking about a title for an image? So it's a lot of different things. And actually, all of those work together. And what is essential, some of those are essential, some of them aren't, depending on what you're trying to do. So first of all, let's just talk about file names. I think early on with these live streams, I did one where I talked about naming conventions. And those are really your internal names for the file so that you can find them. And this is what Brian was talking about in his article, the file name, and he was saying if people are just using DSC, blah, 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 letter, 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 number, 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 that sort of thing, it doesn't mean anything when you've got a folder full of them. And if he was handling images coming in from people, it's actually very difficult to work with them. But for us as photographers, if you've got some form of digital asset management system, a DAM, then your naming convention, what's important with that is that it's unique. However, if you're sending that image to somebody else, you might want, well, I use the term external file name. If I'm doing stuff for one of my clients, I have to name my images according to their standards so that they can find the images they want. They want them named by the reference number of the billboard that I'm photographing. But I need to maintain my internal name so that if they then send one back, say such and such an image, I can still find it in my thing. So we've got that side to it. Now I can see from the comments that Gary is not meaning that, and I didn't think he meant that, but I mentioned that because that's what Brian thought he meant. So do we mean the caption or description? And the caption and description is actually different from the title that you might give to an image. So the caption description is text describing what the image is. So for example, it's so you can find it in some form of management system. So if you're a stock photographer, let's use the example of Amir's sculpture that he'd photographed. The caption for that might be see sculpture, Mary's shell on the coastline at Cleveley's, Lancashire, United Kingdom. That's getting rich data in there that can be searched. That's your caption for your image. That's your description for the image. That's not necessarily your title. And you'll notice if you use Lightroom that you have both title and caption fields, and they are both different. So what is a title then? Well, it can be just a short form description. So in the case of Amir's image, the title might just be Mary's shell. And that is a valid title for it because that's what it is. You don't need to know the things. It's at the sea. You don't need to know it's Cleveley's. You might say Mary Shell Cleveley's, but you possibly wouldn't add in Lancashire, United Kingdom on there. That becomes your title. It's a short form description, but it can be something other than a short form description. The title can also be, I couldn't think of the best phrase for it, but I've used the phrase a humorous caption, where it gives this different slant on the image, which I think is what Gary was referring to when he asked the question, how giving that title to an image can give a different slant on it. Now, back to the original question. How important, well, actually, before I go back to the original question, I just wanted to say that not every image will have one of those humorous captions. I think they all should have a short form description. Whether you display it publicly is another matter, but I always put one with mine. I always have a long form caption, stroke description, and I also have a short form title. I have the two because I use them in different ways. So if I'm doing a slideshow, I might title the slideshow, I don't know, if I was doing Cleveley's, something like that. The title of the slideshow might be a visit to Cleveley's on the beach on such and such a date. And then the captions on each image would be Mary's shell, look at the prom, building sandcastles, whatever. So it becomes the short form within that slideshow because I don't need the long form there. And the same if I was doing a gallery of images. The gallery would have the full description and I'd just use the short form. If, however, that image was being used in a collection of disparate images, so for example, a portfolio of my 10 best images, then I possibly would use the long form, the caption, the full descriptive caption on there. So I would have the two, and I don't always use them. However, back to this sort of humorous caption type that we're talking about. Let me give you an example of how all these different namings come together. I've used the one with Amir. Here's with one of my own images. So the file name, my internal file name, is fb0926a-e and a serial number.dng. My external file name, so for example, if I was sending this to somebody for a critique, to make life easier for them, I prefix it with my initials so that they immediately know from the file name it's mine. I'd put the words otters in there, but I'd maintain my reference number so that if they, at some point in the future, emailed me about a whole load of images that I'd submitted, they could, if they give me that file name, I know exactly which one it is from that latter bit of information on there. My caption, the description on there is 2 otters at the Chestnut Centre, Chapel-on-Frith, Derbyshire, UK. But the title of this image, and if you look at the image, you'll see why it's called this. The title is simply My Hero. And that builds on the expression of the otter looking up to the other one that's standing there all butch. And that's how they all work together. Does every image need a short form? It depends what you're doing with it. They definitely don't need this sort of title like My Hero, that type of caption, almost the cartoon caption in there. They don't all need that. Some images do. I probably have about half a dozen that I have done that with. I do believe most of the time an image should work without any form of captioning underneath on there. And this is one of the things with the Royal Photographic Society. When I first was looking at getting my LRPS, I had all my images were captioned when I put them on display. And I got a slap on the wrist for it. I said, no, that's not acceptable. The images must speak for themselves. When you get onto ARPS, it's quite interesting. You get to a next level where you don't caption the individual images, but you put a statement in about the collection. And actually, there's a real art in writing that statement to pull together the themes from all the images. And effectively, you pull the titles of all the images into that statement if you can be really clever and pull them together. But that statement does give you a different perspective on the images that you're looking at. So yes, it can be important. It depends how you want people to perceive an image. But regardless of that, I would say an image must be able to stand without a title stroke caption. You must be able to look at it and gain something from it without that. If it needs a title or caption for it to make sense, then you've failed as a photographer. The title caption will add to it. So that's my explanation on there. Bit of a long-winded answer to a short question, but I felt it just needed a bit more than a quick answer on that one. And as Gary has pointed out, yes, sadly the Chestnut Centre in Chapel-on-Frith has now closed. I was aware of that, and very sad. All the otters and the wildlife have been moved down to a sister site down in I think Devon. So they were being cared for. So don't worry about that. Right, okay, the final one of our 12020 challenges, and I've gone over again with it. These are from Terry Hewitt, and this is Cleethorpes Country Park. Enjoy. Thank you for those, Terry. It's a lovely collection on there. Just a few thoughts really to say on this. A few things that I really like about this set. I like the use of the square format with it, and I think you've used it well within the collection on there. There's one image I want to draw attention to, and it's this one. And hang on. Come on, Lightroom, behave. It's fit is what I want on there. Right, it's this one. I'll get rid of the information off there. The reason I wanted to mention this one is I'm impressed that I don't know whether this was the framing that you'd intended for it, Terry, but I think it really works with the cyclist just coming into the frame like that. And I'm sorry that in the slideshow you got the white border covering his face and along the edge there, because the way the slideshow software works is it adds the white border over the edge of the image rather than adding it to the outside of it, adds it to the inside on that. So I wanted to show make sure people could see the full thing on there with it. But it's a lovely collection on there, nicely vibrant with it, and this again, this nice mix of images. And I think it just works with that. And considering all those are individual frames, that you've not done a shot, multiple shots to get each one. Every one is the single frame, unless you've been cheating, which I don't believe you have. It's just well done on it, and just kudos for going out and having a go at it. On there. So let me just sort out a few things on here. Right. Brian, who I referred to in the last section, was watching and has commented. Yeah, he says he finds the easiest way to keep the title and the image name the same, adding tags. Images always a good idea, of course. Right. So yeah, that's the comment from Brian. Right. Let me just I think finishing off here. Time's against me. It really is. I've really gone over much longer than I wanted. I was going to talk about some of the images that you guys had submitted to the Facebook group this week. I am going to leave it. I'm really sorry if you were hanging on for that. I'll talk about. Oh, let's go over there. I'll do it very, very quickly. On it. How many have we got in here? Yeah. Just want to talk through just a few of these, just to say, I don't think there's any I wanted to edit anyway from Mary. Just a few comments from Bob. Come on. Right. Yeah, here we go. From Bob Tovey and of the MV Columbus, a ship I've been on a couple of times. It's one of his lockdown images. The ship is sadly stranded in Tilbury at the moment because the company that owns it has gone into administration. Another interesting shot from Bob is the chicks. I love how sharp the images of the birds on there, and the juxtaposition with all the plastic. It really does bring home the problems of pollution with that shot. Peter, this one, nice perspective, lead-in lines. Just watch those verticals. If you're using some editing software, just try and bring those up. And also, I think you're slightly underexposed on it. So just a little bit of a highlight on there. John, I don't think this works bang in the middle. I think it would work better off to 1/3 on one side with it. And it's another one where the shadows are a little bit under, and I'd probably boost the vibrance, possibly a little bit on the saturation too, on that, just to give it a bit more exposure maybe, something like that, and a bit of contrast to it. So I'd go with something like that on that one, John, on there. Another one from Peter. Yeah, he's titled this one, going back to titles, about it being the river. If the river is the main subject on there, I'd like to have seen it from a lower perspective, so that the river was more dominant on the image, and maybe focus on one of the rocks in the foreground on that. John, the 3 images of black and white conversions. As I said, we'll do black and white on another one, but just to say this one I think is the best of the set. I think the point was he was trying to show the progression. That one, the verticals hadn't been corrected, and that was the original. Now, one thing to say about this, the original image is underexposed. So you might want to be looking at exposure compensation to try and make sure there, because we can see here on the histogram, we've got space there. So use your histogram on the camera, because I know you shoot with the Nikon, and use that histogram to try and get the light areas right over onto the right-hand side of it. And you should end up with a histogram looking a little bit more like that, which when you come to do the black and white conversion would be a bit better. You'd be able to preserve the quality because we're introducing noise by lightening it up in post-production on there. I just like this one. This is turning into be a body of work from Gary. Sorry, he visited a recycling plant for dummies. And I just liked some of these images. This one I really like with the light glowing through it. The Doctor Who geek in me just has one word to say: Autons. Anyone who follows Doctor Who will know what I mean. on there. Bill, I don't know whether you're watching because you don't tend to be in the comments on here, but I've got 3 images from Bill. It's all black and white ones, and they're all to do with the COVID situation. And it's made me think, actually, I wish at the start of lockdown I'd documented the things we were seeing. This is going to be a point in history. The country, the world in lockdown. This will be talked about for hundreds of years to come, that the way the world stopped because of COVID. Whatever happens, it will get talked about. And as photographers, we should be documenting it. And I know I haven't, and I should have done. Bill has, so well done, Bill, on that, by just covering different aspects of it in his images. And I really like the way you've used black and white for this sort of documentary feel to it on there. So well done for that, and keep documenting it with that. More of Gary's body of work. Don't lose your head over it though, Gary, and all the praise I'm putting on there. I'm just trying to give you a hand in the right direction. Yeah, actually, I really like this one with the hand reaching out. It's very, very creepy, and that shallow depth of field really, really works on it. So well done. And just I want to say thank you for sharing those images. I do think you've got a good set there. And that's it. So back over to there, and I will try and finish off now in here. So let's move on. Something went wrong. That's the one from Peter that should have appeared earlier, that slide. Yep, and there's the rest of the description with it. No wonder I'm getting confused. Oh, yes, right. A little bit of news from Walter Reynolds, who's saying, tune in to Sky Arts on Tuesday, photography show with Rankin. So those who are interested in Ian Rankin's take on things, have a look at that. And just to wrap up, I just want to say quickly, thank you to everyone, particularly those who've done the 12020 challenge. If you haven't done it, I really want to encourage you to have a go at it. I didn't ask the question today, but people, just let me know what you've learned from doing the 12020 challenge, because it's not as easy as it sounds, and it really does make you think about the images before you create them on there. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for letting me talk about your images and provide feedback on them. And finally, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please comment. Please like. How's the like count going? 12 likes, 18 viewers at the moment. And right, for next time, I'll share at least one more of the 12020 challenges. Hopefully the return of the 3-minute edit challenge, if I can get my act together. But our theme for next week is all about seascapes and boats. And I've done that because it follows on from, I've done landscapes and flowerscapes, and this is a follow-on from it. But also I want to try and encourage some of the photographers I've got to know through the cruises to come and join us. And by doing one that's sea related and ship related, boat related, hopefully I can promote it amongst them, and hopefully we'll have a few new visitors to the live stream next week. So thank you for that, folks. So all it remains is for me to say, as I always do, until next time, keep making great photos, and I'll see you next week. Bye, folks. Right, this is where I record the other ending for when I do a cut down version. If I do a cut down version on all this, it's getting to the point where it may never happen. Right, so if I do, this is what the ending will be. Thanks, folks, for watching this cut down version of Ian's Studio Live. I hope you found it helpful. The full version's now over in my academy find the details up on the screen here. Only £6 a month to join, or £60 a year. So go over there, have a look at that. There's lots of other resources to help you with your photography. So hopefully I'll see you in there, and I hope to see you next time here on In Studio Live. So until then, keep making great photos, and bye for now.